Hello and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Patrick McKeown is a world-renowned author and best-selling and breathing practitioner. In a career spanning 15 years, Patrick has also become a best-selling author and expert on the topic of optimal breathing for improved health, well-being, and fitness. Among the 9 books Patrick has written, several have consistently remained in the top 10 bestsellers on Amazon, including Close Your Mouth and Asthma-Free Naturally. His show-stopping book, The Oxygen Advantage, is based on 4 years of scientific research and tailors breathing exercises for anyone seeking to improve their fitness and sports performance. Patrick was recently made a Fellow of the Royal Society of Biology in the UK for his contribution to our understanding of breathing. He has widely been interviewed by national and international media. He has received endorsements from popular health gurus, such as our former guest Danny Dreyer, the founder of ChiRunning. Patrick has also worked with top-level athletes and Olympians, including another former guest and former Ironman world champion Pete Jacobs, among others. Patrick's passion for his subject enables him to continue developing and refining his techniques to improve the fitness, performance, and focus of professional and non-professional athletes worldwide. His latest best-selling book was published in July of 2021 called The Breathing Cure: Exercises to Develop New Breathing Habits for a Healthier, Happier, and Longer Life. Patrick, it is an absolute honor to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I must update that bio, Casey. That's it's all good. It's a bit embarrassing listening to it, but hence I'm here anyway.
Well, I goofed it up because it's so long, and I still had to abbreviate so much of it.
No, you can shorten that to 3 sentences.
What would those 3 sentences be if you had your way?
I teaches breathing.
That's great. Well, like I said, it's such an honor to have you on the show. We followed your work for a very, very long time. It's really great work, and it seems to be this thing that is so critical and so important, but we don't pay that much attention to it. I mean, I can fast for several days and not die. I can not drink water for a few days and not die, but if I stop breathing for a few minutes, I will die. So why is breathing so critical but so misunderstood?
I think it's because it was taught incorrectly for so many years. And it was taught by people who had very little understanding of the breath. You know, how many times have we been told to take a deep breath and take a big breath, and the more air you breathe, the better, and bring in as much oxygen as you can and get rid of carbon dioxide? There's an awful lot of nonsense out there. If people, what got me into the breath was I had poor health, and I remember practicing an exercise. Within 5 minutes, it decongested my nose. So I knew there was something there. And then I started breathing less air, doing the opposite to what people were saying. And I improved the temperature of my hands. I could feel them getting warmer. You know, so there is, you know, I suppose just we need to take breathing away from the left of field. We need to bring it into the center. And if people really, really understood, you know, what can be achieved through the breath, because by changing breathing patterns, you can influence all of the major disciplines of medicine, and can have such an impact on the autonomic nervous system. And, you know, even I think the most basic traits that we can have as human beings to develop are concentration and attention span. Concentration is our ability or able to hold our attention on one thing, and attention span is the length of time that we can hold our attention on one thing. And if we learn to change our breathing patterns, but more importantly, breathe optimally to improve deep sleep. And with deep sleep and with functional breathing, we can improve our concentration, we can improve our attention span, and we can enter flow states. And for every walk of life, from the teenager in school, to the university students, to the corporate worker, to sports, to military, everybody can do with training their brain, using the breath. And it's not about mindfulness. Mindfulness is not going to work for the very person who needs it the most. If a person is physiologically in a state of fight or flight, or if a person has obstructive sleep apnea, or snoring hard, or insomnia, or racing mind, and physiologically, you know, they can do all the mindfulness in the world, they're going to find it very frustrating. They're likely to abandon it. So instead, we should be targeting the root cause and getting a balance in the autonomic nervous system, calming the physiology first, and then bring in breath awareness, body awareness, mind awareness.
So we've got the cart in front of the horse, essentially. Like you can't work on mindfulness unless the breathing technique is there and corrected.
No, I don't think so. And this was something I learned back in 2010 because I had 3,000 people who came into courses from 2010 to 2013, and they attended for anxiety and panic disorder and high stress. And I asked them, how many of you here have ever taken up meditation? Small amount, maybe 5%, 10% even. And how many of you here still continue to do it? And the fall off rate was unbelievable, and I just realized then, I said, can anybody imagine if your mind, like Casey, there's an odd day that we'll wake up and we're feeling lousy. And can you imagine if we were told to, start observing your mind and observing your breath when you're feeling lousy? You just don't want to do it. You don't have the energy, that you don't have the wherewithal. There's easier ways to change the physiology, even by, and I'm not saying just about, I'm talking about we have to change the breath. It's not enough just to focus on the breath. And we change the breath to improve blood flow to the brain. We change the breath to stimulate the vagus nerve. We change the breath to bring the body and mind into balance. And that's where it should be. And it comes back to as well, like, can we achieve a calm mind if we have lousy sleep? I don't think so. And people with depression, very often they are exhausted. They can have an underlying sleep disorder. The depression is being targeted, but very few healthcare professionals are focusing on the individual's sleep. And I remember about 10 years ago, a woman came into me with depression. And I asked her, I said, how do you feel when you wake up in the morning? And she says, I wake up absolutely exhausted. And I asked her, has anybody asked you about whether you have sleep apnea or whether you have upper airway resistance syndrome? In other words, has anybody ever investigated your sleep? And she said, no. And we have to consider that the human body is very complex. There's a bi-directional relationship there. And I think in her case, I think her healthcare professionals were believing that it was depression which was causing exhaustion. Well, maybe we should be asking the question, could this person have undiagnosed obstructive sleep apnea? And could that be causing chronic anxiety because she's not able to function? And chronic anxiety then contributing to depression. So we do have to start, delving a little bit deeper here. And there's a few things as well that oftentimes people are afraid to go out of their own space. And the psychotherapist is maybe targeting and providing cognitive behavioral therapy, but 75% of the anxiety population have dysfunctional breathing.
Wow.
So if you have an individual going into a psychotherapist and that person is one of those 75%, breathing a little bit faster and harder, with irregular breathing patterns, with an increased chemosensitivity to carbon dioxide, which can all be easily addressed, that person will go to their psychotherapist to do their CBT and they walk back out with dysfunctional breathing. It's a shame.
Wow. How does trauma play into that?
The first documented accounts of the effect or change in breathing patterns came as a result of the American Civil War. And it was soldiers returning from the front line. And they exhibited symptoms of breathlessness and fatigue, and it took them a long, long time to recover. And it was a doctor at the front line called Da Costa. And the condition was termed the Costa syndrome. When we get into that stressful situation, we typically respond by breathing harder and breathing faster, upper chest breathing, irregular breathing. We may even be stopping breathing. And if we have long-term stress, the breathing pattern will become habitual. And even when the stress is removed, the poor breathing pattern will remain. And it's not just that stress and trauma is causing a change to our breathing, but the suboptimal breathing is feeding into that stress and trauma. So, for example, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, we've seen countless individuals, and some of our instructors are working directly with veterans and talking about, the relationship between PTSD and panic disorder. If an individual is breathing that little bit faster and harder, upper chest breathing, physiologically, they are in that state of fight or flight. And their brain is always on edge and their sleep is going to be impacted. And poor sleep and poor breathing is going to feed into the condition. So with somebody coming into me with panic disorder, we start off very, very gently, because I've made plenty of mistakes, and I've unwittingly put people into panic attacks. And we start off with a very, very simple breath hold recovery. And this helps to stimulate the vagus nerve. And it's like exercise is so simple. You take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose, and pinch your nose and hold your breath, for 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go. Breathe in through your nose. Breathe normal for 10 seconds and do it again. And again, you just take a normal breath in through your nose and out through your nose. Pinch your nose and hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let go. Breathe in through your nose and breathe normal for 10 seconds. And I've had some people do that exercise for between 5 to 10 minutes every hour, because we can stimulate the vagus nerve. So this nerve that's wandering throughout the human body, innervating all of the major organs and feeding 80 to 90% of the communication of the vagus nerve is from the body up to the brain. So by stimulating the vagus nerve, it secretes a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, which causes a slowing of the heart. And when the heart rate slows down, the brain interprets that the body is in a safe environment. And the brain then will send signals of calm to the body. So I suppose it's almost that we can tap into the body's primitive fight or flight response and relaxation response. And if you think that we as human beings have evolved over millions of years, and always, throughout our evolution, whenever we were confronted by a stress, our breathing got faster, harder, upper chest breathing. And the brain has one concern. The brain is to get the body out of that situation, to protect the body. But we still respond that way to how we, responded throughout our evolution. If we breathe faster and harder during rest or during sleep, the brain thinks that the body is under threat. And if we take a soft breath in through the nose and a really relaxed and a slow and gentle exhalation, the brain is thinking that the body is safe. So even if you're in a difficult situation, you're in a workplace and the situation is difficult, bring some attention onto your breath and take a very soft breath in through your nose and allow a very relaxed and a slow and gentle exhalation. Because this way, the body is telling the brain that everything is okay. And when the brain is feeling that everything is okay, you're more likely then to be able to deal with the situation. And it was interesting. I wrote a book called Atomic Focus there, and it was released just about 2 weeks ago. But for that, I was listening to an interview of a brain surgeon on a UK podcast, Dr. Rangan Chatterjee. And the surgeon spoke about, he said, whenever I get into a tricky situation, the first thing I prevent myself from doing is hyperventilating. And he said that people think he's born with nerves of steel. And I said, bingo, this guy has it. Because you can imagine, you couldn't find much more stressful than having somebody in front of you with their skull open and you looking into their brain. And, getting into a tricky situation, he has to be absolutely focused and clear-headed. And he knows that if the stress causes his breathing to get faster and harder, he is not going to make the right decision. Wow. And this is simple stuff that could be taught in school. I was a chronic hyperventilator in school and all the way through university. And I will say this, I was living stuck in my head. I would be looking at a page, but my attention wasn't on the page. My attention was stuck in my mind. And I would be studying for 10 and 12 hours a day to try and get grades, because our education system has really failed us. It has failed us because it hasn't gave us the tools to deal with what we need to deal with in modern life. It's almost that the education system was something that was set up about 100 years ago and just hasn't kept the pace. We shouldn't be, in terms of, even if I talk about coming back to those two traits, concentration and attention span, society demands that we have good concentration, and society demands that we have a good attention span, because this is how we are productive, and this is how we can produce quality of work, and this is how we have a quiet mind, and we're more creative, we're more intuitive, but we are happier. But society demands it, education demands it, the corporate workforce demands it, but nobody's teaching us how. And mindfulness is not doing it. And I'll give you an example. I was working with snipers there about a month, well, not even a month ago, 3 weeks ago. And these guys are elite police. So they're, very much, I suppose, police that are verging on military in terms of their training. They would do 1.5 to 2 hours of physical training every day. And they would be sent into the most difficult situations. And part of their training is that when they are on a shift and they are behind the sight of a rifle, they are on that shift for 1 hour. And for 1 hour, they have to have absolute focused attention through that sight.
Wow.
And observe everything. And where we broke down the detail, even as far as how to breathe while pulling the trigger of a gun. And I had never pulled a trigger. I did maybe 20 years ago when I was out with a shotgun, shooting for rabbits, when we were younger. But other than that, and I broke it down beforehand. I was just thinking, I says, okay, well, how is, in terms of the autonomic nervous system, what options do we have here? Well, you could breathe in and hold your breath and pull the trigger, or you could breathe out and hold your breath and pull the trigger, or you could pull the trigger during the breath in, or you could pull the trigger during the exhalation. And I said, where's the best place? Well, it has to be at the bottom of the exhalation. So you have your finger on the trigger and you're taking that breath in through your nose, a soft breath in through your nose, and a very relaxed and a slow and gentle breath out. And as you're having that slow and gentle breath out, the body and mind is going into that state of flow, calmness and alertness at the same time. And you breathe into the shot just at the bottom of the exhalation. But if you lose focus, wait until the next breath and do it again. And it worked very, very well. And, this is simple stuff. Person taking a penalty during a soccer shootout, or a person who has been sin binned during a rugby game, or, different things that we tend to naturally get anxious. Somebody going into a job interview, like I've had people coming into me in a job interview. And I remember one girl come in and she was a lovely girl, but she was breathing faster and she was breathing harder and she was sighing. And she just gave me the impression that she was under a lot of stress during the interview. And all she's doing was telling me, subconsciously or unconsciously, she's telling me that she's not fit for the job. And we have to be very careful with the cues that we put out in terms of breathing. Because if we feel under pressure or if we feel under stress, our breathing naturally changes. But other people will pick up on that. And if you think of the people who are most anxious, and this was even looked at in terms of music students pre-concert, before a concert, they assessed their breathing. And the music students, because of the stress of the upcoming performance, their breathing was changing. But the students with the most anxiety had the most irregular breathing patterns. Now we can change this and we can improve the resilience. And we use a breath hold time. You'll have come across at the Bolt score. If your Bolt score is above 25 seconds, you're in a pretty good place in terms of breathing. But if you have a Bolt score of 10 or 15 or even 20 seconds, your breathing is that bit faster, harder, upper chest breathing. And especially if it's down around 10 seconds, you're in trouble. And what it means is that it's not the situation that pushes us into that stress, but it's our reaction to it. But if we are already physiologically in a state of increased sympathetic drive or increased stress response, it doesn't take much to tip us over. And resilience is something as human beings that we need, and we can tap into that via the breath.
Wow, that is so amazing. I was astounded when I started following your work and tried to do my own Bolt score. And, I've been a pretty fit guy and cycle and play hockey and all kinds of stuff. And my score was not very high. I had to, use your drills and, really practice like mouth taping and things like that to get my score up. Can you explain the Bolt score just a little bit more in detail and how somebody can do that?
Yeah, the Bolt score is very simple. You're just sitting down for about 5 minutes or so, just allow your breathing to settle and don't care what you get because it's just to give you some feedback. You take a normal breath in through your nose and a normal breath out through your nose. pinch your nose with your fingers, and time how long does it take until you feel the first definite desire to breathe, or the first involuntary movement of your breathing muscles. So it's not the maximum length of your breath hold time. You're taking a normal inhalation and a normal exhalation. You're holding your breath and you're timing how long does it take until you feel that you need to breathe. And when you let go, your breathing at the end should be fairly normal. And we've been using this for about 20 years, but it's been around for about 40, 45 years, 46 years. And most recently, there was a paper by a professor of physical therapy, Kyle Kiesel, and he looked at 51 individuals, and his conclusion was that your breath hold time, and he measured it exactly as the Bolt score. If it's above 25 seconds, there is an 89% chance that dysfunctional breathing is not present. Now, what it means is, though, an individual with a low Bolt score is more likely to be too breathless during physical exercise. So I can give you this example. You can imagine 5 players on the team, and all of those players are going to be doing pretty much the same training. But yet you might have 1 or 2 players that no matter how hard they train, something is holding them back, that they're disproportionately breathless. They are excessively breathless. They are gassing out too soon. Physical training does not improve our breathing patterns, because how you breathe during physical training and physical activity is determined by how you breathe outside of it. So if you have an individual who's going around with their mouth open, or an individual who's sleeping with their mouth open, or breathing a little bit up into the upper chest, or breathing a little bit faster and harder, that suboptimal breathing pattern is going to translate straight into the sports, and it's going to hold them back during physical exercise. And, there's a genetic component here as well. People with asthma, more likely to have dysfunctional breathing patterns. People with anxiety, people with panic disorder, 50% of people with lower back pain, but also females. So, for example, females because of hormonal changes. So the breathing of females has been different than the breathing to men. And this has been known since 1915, because during the monthly cycle post-ovulation, so it's mid-luteal phase, from days 10 to days 22, there's an increase in the hormone progesterone, which is a respiratory stimulant. And breathing will become faster and harder during this time. And carbon dioxide levels can drop by as much as 25%. This in turn is going to increase pain perception. It reduces pain thresholds. It contributes to fatigue, contributes to anxiety and panic disorder, and increased sensation of air hunger. The symptoms of PMS in the female are directly attributable to the changes of breathing brought about by changes in hormones. Now, how many females have put that connection together? And it's unfortunate that most research on breathing has been done by men. And even when research is done on women, they fail to take into consideration the monthly cycle. Wow. But a lot of females must feel that something is not quite right, and their breathing is getting that little bit faster and harder. But the one thing about the breath is that you can influence it yourself.
Mm. Yeah, that's so interesting. I didn't know any of that until I learned it from you in a podcast recently. That's really interesting information. I have a 2-part question related to what you were just talking about. What are some of the benefits of nasal breathing, and what are some of the dangers of breathing through the mouth? Because I think most people just think like, well, what does it matter? I can breathe through my nose or my mouth. Who cares which one? And I don't think most people consider there's a difference between the two.
Well, I suppose you have to ask the first question, what does the mouth do in terms of breathing? Does it perform any function? What is the mouth? The mouth is a hole. That's all it is. Air comes straight in through the mouth down the throat. And it does nothing else. It doesn't moisten the air, it doesn't warm air, it doesn't regulate volume, it doesn't have a great amplitude of the diaphragm. So, and also the nose has about 30 functions, or even more than 30 functions. Most recently, it's been known that visuospatial awareness improves with nasal breathing. So you can imagine a player on the field, and that player has to be focusing on the game in front of them, but also reading and scanning the entire pitch. Nasal breathing helps with that. There's something about breathing through the nose, which is a very primordial thing, that a function that we were doing throughout our evolution. And we even select our mates based on the communication from the nose to the brain. And there's an interesting paper that was published in 2012. Women who were on the pill, who met their partners, when the women came off the pill, they were identifying differently with their partners. So because the pill apparently was affecting their sense of smell.
Wow.
So we select our partners based on communication or information that's relayed by the nose. So, what does mouth breathing do? Mouth breathing is very much engaging the upper chest. It's faster breathing. It's a fight or flight response. And it's been known since 1988 that when you breathe through your nose, the pressure of oxygen in the blood increases by 10%. And when you do physical exercise with your mouth closed, carbon dioxide in the blood increases. And as carbon dioxide in the blood increases, hemoglobin, which is the main carrier of oxygen, releases oxygen more readily to the tissues. So working muscles are better oxygenated while breathing through the nose during physical exercise. But nose breathing is also activating the diaphragm, and the diaphragm breathing muscle is not just for respiration, but provides stabilization for the spine. Functional breathing and functional movement go together. And earlier on, I spoke about that 50% of people with lower back pain have dysfunctional breathing. And a person with dysfunctional breathing is typically engaging more use of the upper chest, and they're not getting the benefit of the movement of the diaphragm providing that stabilization. So there's quite a few functions, very simple ones, like better oxygen uptake, as I spoke about, better oxygen delivery, less trauma to the upper airways. But look at sleep. Earlier on, I spoke about the importance of deep sleep. And when you have that deep, deep sleep and you wake up and you're feeling absolutely restored and rested, that's a great start to the day. And that's also more conducive to having a calm mind. And again, any of your listeners, like the next time that you wake up and you're feeling pretty lousy, just ask yourself, are you in a good mood that day? Can we have absolute focus and concentration and that ability to achieve our full potential if we have poor sleep quality? And I had poor sleep quality for about 20 years. And we're sent in, go into school and you're supposed to be sitting there listening attentively to a teacher, and your attention is completely lost in brain fog. And it's very frustrating for kids. And a lot of kids, like I left school at 14 years of age, and I've only said that first time, most recently in the last 2 to 3 weeks when I put out that book. And the reason being is because I was so frustrated with school. And my parents considered that I was better off out of it than I was in it. Now, life had a bit of a twist, and I went back. And I worked pretty hard to get into a university. And I wasn't leaving school to become a dosser. I was leaving school because I had my sights on opening up a shop and developing that. But, so drive has been very important to me. Ambition is very important to me. But I was sabotaging myself. And I was sabotaging myself because I was going around with my mouth open and breathing fast and hard. But many people are in the same position. And many kids, they're not going to achieve their full potential. And 25 to 50% of studied kids are mouth breathing. It's impacting their sleep. But what's more important, the brain of a child is developing during the early years. And there was a study of 11,000 children conducted over 5 years by a researcher, I think she's an American researcher, called Karen Bonnock. And it was published in the journal Pediatrics in 2012. Children with sleep disorder breathing at age 5, if it's untreated, they had a 40% increased risk of special education needs by age 8. Now, I can't remember the stats. It gave the statistics of the number of people in that paper who were affected by sleep disorder breathing related conditions in the United States. I think it was 3 million people. 3 million.
Wow.
3 million people that have developmental issues as a result of poor sleep during childhood. Because if you have poor sleep during childhood, it can cause damage to the brain. And I'm not putting this out as scaremongering. Like, look at the stats here. And I know the unfortunate thing is it doesn't get out there and parents are not aware of it, but it should.
Wow. That is incredible. Thank you for sharing your own personal journey with that. It sounds like you powered through a lot better than I did. I remember falling asleep every morning in my first period class and every afternoon after lunch, eating just a terrible diet and mouth breathing all the time. That's pretty staggering. I'm curious. We talked a little bit about the misconceptions around deep breathing. I would love to know the misconceptions that also surround the placement of the tongue inside the mouth and how that affects the position of your teeth. That's super fascinating.
Yeah, like our ancestors were innate nasal breathers, and with the lips together, the mouth is closed, one is breathing in and out through the nose. And the ideal resting position is for the tongue to be resting against the palate. So 3/4 of the tongue to be pressed up against the roof of the mouth. And when we grow up as children, as the tongue is resting against the roof of the mouth, the tongue is exerting a pressure and it's helping to drive the growth of the face forward. And it's also helping to develop the top jaw, which is the maxilla. And with a wide shape top jaw, there's plenty of room for the tongue, but there's also plenty of room for the teeth. So crooked teeth are not necessarily because the teeth are too big. Crooked teeth are very often because the jaws are too small. Now, I know traditional orthodontists will often say the opposite. They would say that the child is overcrowding of teeth because the child has inherited the big teeth from the dad and the small jaws from the mom. But a lot of orthodontists don't agree with that. And they don't agree with extractions because if the mouth and the jaw is already too small because of poor breathing patterns and thumb sucking and tongue tie and different things, does it make sense then to extract teeth? Because if you extract teeth in a 12-year-old or 11-year-old, what you're doing is you're making the mouth even smaller. And if the mouth is smaller, well, where is the tongue going to go? There's no room for the tongue, so it's going to fall back into the airway. And if you look at the incidence of obstructive sleep apnea throughout the world, but especially in, more modern countries, it's reaching endemic proportions. It's exerting a huge toll on cardiovascular health, on mental health, quality of life, etc. So, I think the orthodontic profession, and I'm not going to criticize any individual orthodontist here, but the dental profession has such an important role to play, not just in terms of correct teeth or straight teeth, but more importantly is the development of the airway and the forward growth of the face. Because in the very process of improving and straightening teeth, that orthodontist can also improve the child's overall health. And orthodontists and dentists are in a great position to recognize for the risk factors of sleep disorders. Like I'm a 47-year-old man, and I'm sure I'm not much different than many of your male listeners. I haven't been to a medical doctor. It's 10 years at least. And the only reason before that it was because I ran into something and I hurt my head and I had to get 4 stitches. So I've never been to a medical doctor in 20 years, except for that one instance. Now, many men in my position and many men with sleep apnea, which is undiagnosed. So we are not going to the medical doctor frequently. That's just the way it is. But we go to our dentist frequently. And the dentist is looking into the mouth. And the dentist can pick up on if there's a high narrow palate, if the jaws are set back, if there's scalloping of the tongue, etc. And the dentist is in an ideal position to alert the person that they may have sleep issues and to get the person to do something about it. But the dental profession has not moved on this. It's almost as if they have been asleep behind the wheel. And they have been asleep with children as well, because there's nothing new about this information. And I know you interviewed James Nestor, and we were on a panel going back, about 7 months ago. And there was a Professor John Mew was there, and Dr. Mike Mew and Dr. William Hang, and James Nestor was there, and other doctors, Kevin Boyd, and a few others. And the same question come up, like why has breathing not moved on? Why hasn't professions taken on board the importance of functional breathing with breathing in and out through the nose? And I'll tell you why. And I said it back during that panel discussion, because it doesn't promise profit. That's why. I can absolutely guarantee one thing. If there was a promise of millions of dollars to be made from teaching people how to breathe through their nose, the professions would be doing it. But there's no promise because it's free. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be put out there. And it's just a pity that money drives our healthcare system.
It's so sad. And it keeps coming up in all kinds of different ways. I mean, we mentioned food and the medical system and things like breathing. You're right. Like if people start eating the right way, they're not going to buy as much food. They're not going to need to go to the doctor as much. And you're right. Like nobody makes any money on that. Why would they want to tell us about that? It's not something that can be sold. I'm really curious, like for a baby that maybe had a pacifier in a bottle versus being breastfed, having wisdom teeth removed, like you said, can that be recovered later on in life in your experience? Or is that something that once you're past a certain age, if you have, things like crooked teeth or a narrow face, you're kind of stuck with it?
It's a very good question. I don't think it can be recovered. Now, in saying that, there is a concept called a mewing, Mewing, and it was named by people on social media. They were following the work of Dr. Mike Mew and Dr. John Mew. And they have published photographs and changes to their face as a result of chewing and nasal breathing with correct tongue resting posture. So it could be possible. But if I was a parent, I wouldn't take the chance of waiting. Okay, granted, if the child is 16 or 17 years of age and the face is almost fully grown, you know what? Let's get the mouth closed and the tongue resting in the roof of the mouth, because it can only help anyway. And it will help the child's sleep, concentration, mood, physical exercise performance, etc. But for a young child, if you have a 7 or 8 or 9-year-old or 10 or 11-year-old or 12-year-old kid, and the child is there and they have crooked teeth, and the choice is, well, if we get this child breathing through the nose with the tongue resting in the roof of the mouth, and we hope this will sort itself out. No, I'd say go get professional help there, because there's only a brief opportunity. And it's a very, very brief. And in actual fact, the earlier that a child goes to a functional orthodontist, the better, because the functional orthodontist is not just looking at straightening the teeth, but also directing the growth of the face. And of course, nasal breathing goes hand in hand with that. There's a really good people that you could interview as well. One is Dr. William Hang from Agora Hills in California, and an amazing orthodontist, and an orthodontist that has been practicing for several decades and understands the airway and the children going into him, that he's guiding that growth. Dr. Mike Mew, Professor John Mew now, who's he's elderly. He's 91 years of age, and he's still well, I'm not sure if he's practicing now, but he's still on the circle in terms of giving talks and things like that. So there's a cohort of orthodontists who really get this and are pushing it and putting it out there. And, I think it's amazing. And yes, professional help is very, very important. If you have a child with crooked teeth, and if the child is sitting there with the mouth open. Now, in terms of breathing exercises, they are all free of charge for kids. If you look at our website, buteycoclinic.com, and you'll see that there's 7 or 8 different breathing exercises. All of the exercises for kids are free, or from the app, Buteyco Clinic app. All of the exercises are free for kids. So if you are a parent and you think that your child has poor breathing, or if your child has nasal obstruction, you can decongest the nose within about 5 minutes by simply holding the breath. And, this has been known since 1923. So sit your child in front of the television or the phone or whatever, and have the child do the exercises as I'm demonstrating them. And I'm working with my own child, and you'll see she's 11 years of age. She's putting the exercise into practice, and all your child has to do is simply follow suit. And children are very resilient. Kids with asthma, it's an amazing way, amazing method to improve quality of life for asthma.
Wow. Man, that is so cool. And I know you have those free resources, and I so much appreciate that you are putting those out for free. It must be so wonderful, not having this available when you were a child, but to be able to pass this on to your own child and see the benefit there. I'm curious, one of my very favorite practices is mouth taping. Is mouth taping safe for children as well?
Yeah, we use a tape. We developed a tape going back, I think, 1 or 2 years ago called Myotape. It's not safe to put the tape across the lips of a child. The Myotape that we use it both with children and with adults, because sometimes adults can be apprehensive, especially if an adult has a little bit of anxiety. So we have a tape that surrounds the mouth, but it's elasticated, so it doesn't touch the lips. It surrounds the mouth and it brings the lips together. So the child, if they had to, they can breathe through their mouth. And we use the tape during the day first, because we want to make sure that the child can functionally breathe through the nose. They practice the exercises. They're doing the nose breathing. And once their nose then is working better and working well, and the parent is sure of it, then we would say, use Myotape during sleep. So first establish if the child can functionally breathe through the nose, and only for children, say, over 4 years of age, not young children. So yeah, no, it definitely don't put the tape across the lips. It's not good.
Gotcha. That's a great answer. This blew my mind, and it makes a lot of sense to me now, but this blew my mind when I heard you on Pete Jacobs' show, Live Your Own Fit, talk about how nasal breathing could help with immunity, especially during a pandemic with the respiratory virus. Can you educate our listeners a little bit about that? I thought this was absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, and there was a gas that was first identified in the exhale breath of the human in 1991, and the gas is called nitric oxide, and it's produced in the paranasal sinuses and possibly in the nasal cavity. And it's when we breathe through the nose that we pick up this gas, nitric oxide. And as we're taking that air into the lungs, nitric oxide helps to open up the airways. It's a bronchodilator, but it also redistributes the blood throughout the lungs. And it's antibacterial and it's antiviral. So we have a gas that's released into the nasal airway, and it can help. For example, we have seen observations over the years of people reducing common colds and reducing chest infections, etc. Now, there was a paper that was published in Microbes and Infection, and the researchers spoke exactly of the very same thing. Could nasal breathing mitigate the severity of COVID-19? And they put exactly that. They looked at the functions of nitric oxide, and they also said that their own experience anecdotally of when people tape their mouth closed during sleep, that it also could reduce the viral load, because it's giving the immune system sufficient time to mount an adequate response. Now, alongside this, there is an inhaler that's on the market, and it's undergone some clinical trials. I've no interest, I've no kind of involvement, so I don't know anything about the inhaler, but the name of it is called Sanotize. Now, I read about it in the Pharmacy Times. This is an inhaler that releases nitric oxide into the nasal airway, and it has been shown to reduce the severity of the condition. So people who are infected with COVID, that they recover much quicker by simply inhaling this gas. Now, we can generate our own nitric oxide. We are generating it anyway by nasal breathing. It's happening. But humming, and this is where you might take a breath in through your nose and then you're humming. And by humming, you're vibrating the nasal cavity and the nasal passages. And this in turn then is causing nitric oxide to be emptied or dumped from the paranasal sinuses into the nasal cavity. Breath holding will also increase nitric oxide. So, I think nitric oxide is really a gas worth looking for. And it's through the nose and not through the mouth. And nobody should wake up with a dry mouth in the morning. And 50% of the adult population do, very understudied. But anybody who's waking up with a dry mouth in the morning, they're more likely to have to get up to go to the bathroom during the night. They're more likely to have light sleep. They're more likely to snore, to have insomnia, to have obstructive sleep apnea and to wake up feeling unrefreshed. And also with that, their dental health can be impacted, because if we have a dry mouth, bacteria is more rampant. And this can contribute to bad breath, but it can also contribute to gum disease and dental cavities. Mouth breathers typically have poorer dental health than nose breathers. So, there's many benefits of it, but it was kind of interesting that we never really heard much about, the importance of breathing through the nose in this pandemic. And even if people were infected, it's so important that they breathe in and out through the nose, because you can imagine, say, for example, there's a family member is infected with COVID and the person is feeling breathless. And because of the condition, their breathing is faster and harder. If it's affected, their breathing. And they're feeling air hunger. And as a result, they open their mouth to breathe. So they're sitting there in the family home with their mouth open, breathing fast and hard. And mouth breathing is emitting 42% greater water loss out into the atmosphere. So if the virus is transmitted via water particles in the air, well then standing next to a person who's breathing in and out through the mouth is going to increase the viral load put into the atmosphere.
Wow. Yeah, it makes, again, so much sense when you really think about it, but it really caught me off guard when you said it. I just think even, the physical barrier, breathing in and out through the nose, if I ever get, we followed the advice and you try to stay away from crowds, but if we ever get in a sticky situation, just kind of, calmly holding the breath or nose breathing, there's no real buildup, there's no potential buildup.
Yes.
Of viral load at all. And I feel like that's such an amazing safety mechanism.
Yeah. I think people were intuitively or instinctively doing it. It's funny, because back in February of 2020, I was still traveling a lot. And I remember being in crowded tube stations and a crowded tube subway in London. And I was just thinking to myself that here's so many people on this train, and all it takes is one person to be infected. And for the entire duration, I breathed hardly any air for the entire duration. And breathing light, and I had air hunger there. And it is true, because does it make sense that if we take a reduced volume of the load into the body, that the immune system has less work to do to mount an adequate response? And I'm not saying that nasal breathing can stop COVID, but what I am saying is that whatever chance we have, it's going to be much better than standing there with your mouth wide open and taking the particles, unrestrained into the lungs.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. What a cool story. I love that. The Oxygen Advantage is a super enjoyable book. I've listened to it several times now. It's a great mix of science with some really great stories, your own personal story. I'm curious, you're experiencing in writing your new book, The Breathing Cure. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
The Breathing Cure was an interesting one. It's a little bit, it's different to the Oxygen Advantage. The Oxygen Advantage is kind of more performance-based. It's very much exercise performance. And The Breathing Cure it's quite a deep book. So it mightn't be for everybody. There's a lot of science to it. I wanted to show that breathing has got a good application. I wanted to take it away from the woo-woo, and to show that, yes, it's logical. But in fairness, even though there are situations where the research is scanty, it's just because, again, it doesn't. I can't imagine drug companies, for example, doing research on breathing, because it's not going to make profit. So the research, we would love to see much more research, but I put topics into The Breathing Cure that are not covered in the Oxygen Advantage. Epilepsy, for example. Women's breathing, functional movement, sleep disorder breathing, and obstructive sleep apnea. Asthma is covered in both. Craniofacial development is covered in both, but probably a little bit more deeper in the Breathing Cure. So yeah, it's kind of it's a nice book, and it's a book that would be, if people if they don't want to read the whole thing, it's the first 2 to 3 chapters is the most important, and then the rest of the book, because it's a big book. The rest of the book, then you can delve into when you want to go a little bit deeper into it.
That sounds great. I can't wait to pick that up. I'm curious to know if there's a story that comes to mind. You do such a great job in Oxygen Advantage telling other people's story, but I'm curious to know, recently, is there a story that comes to mind where breathing really helps somebody out? You had the story about the snipers, which I think is absolutely amazing, but is there another story that comes to mind?
Yeah, so, comes to mind. We've had quite a few people who unfortunately did catch COVID and used the breathing exercises to help reduce. First of all, one of the symptoms for many people was that the nose kept on getting stuffy. So you can use different breathing exercise to help open up the nose. But breathlessness is also quite a common feature. And we use small breath holds and slow breathing and light breathing to help to reduce the onset of breathlessness. And the other thing is about breathing low with the nose as well to improve oxygen uptake in the blood. I put out a YouTube video back in March of 2020, and it's had about 900,000 views. And it includes exercises to help people to recover with COVID. And in that, if you look through the comments, you'll see that there's, it's been a long time now since I've looked at it, but I'm assuming that there's comments there. You'll see people who've been using the exercises and that they've experienced benefits as a result of doing it. And I would say to people, don't just think about the breath. It's not just about taking that deep breath. And it's not about going into a studio and filling your lungs full of air and you're going to hear everybody is breathing around them. It's much more to that. If, for example, if you are sitting at home this evening or whatever, put one hand on your chest and one hand just above your navel. Bring your attention onto your breath and gently slow down the speed of the air as it enters and as it leaves your lungs. And really slow down the speed of the breath until you feel air hunger. And air hunger signifies that carbon dioxide is increasing in the blood. And with the increase of carbon dioxide, it stimulates the vagus nerve. So your mouth will start to feel more watery, which is a very good sign because you're activating the rest and digest response. But you might also be able to improve the circulation in your hands. So, for example, your hands get warmer. And here's an exercise about breathing less. And this is totally contrary to most of the information out there, which is telling you to breathe more. If you breathe more, your blood vessels constrict and less oxygen gets delivered. And if you're doing hard and fast breathing, it's a stressor. Now, it's fine to do hard and fast breathing for maybe a minute or 2 minutes to stress the body, and you can be doing breath holds. That's fine. But also think about your everyday breathing. And it should be in and out through the nose. It should be light. It should be slow. And it should be deep. And you don't have to take a big breath to have a deep breath. So it's going deeper than the breath and understanding that, yes, you can open up your blood vessels. You can open up your airways. You can change your states. You can improve your sleep. You can improve your asthma. If you're recovering from COVID, you can improve that. Fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, epilepsy, high blood pressure, low blood pressure, sports performance, mental health. And I'm not saying that this is a cure-all, but there is something about the breath that we can influence so many functions and disciplines of medicine. And it's accessible to us all.
It's so remarkable, all the different things that you've discovered that breathing can help with. And you're right. Like I practice these things, while I'm driving and I feel more relaxed, or when I'm on a walk, do a simple breath hold, and it just bleeds out onto so many other aspects of my life. It's so critically important, and it is just so accessible. I hope they don't charge us in the future for breathing, but I guess I wouldn't be surprised if they did. You're nonstop, man. You work all the time. Is there something you're working on currently, or do you get a rest for a little while?
Yeah, I've no kind of, once I got atomic focus across the line, we're building a clinic. So I suppose that's the part that I'm kind of focusing on now at the moment. But it's been a great few years. It's been a very, very busy few years, and we've got a good team around us. I've got a great team, and we're very fortunate. We've different products out there as well, that kind of support what we're doing, and courses, many, many different courses that are like, I give Zoom courses all the time. So, and they're very accessible. For example, I give courses for people with anxiety and panic disorder, and it's $50 for 2 hours. And then I have a course then for sleep disorder breathing, which is insomnia, snoring, and sleep apnea. It's the same price. And these are live. So basically what I'm doing is I'm working with maybe 15 people through Zoom. And there's interaction. I'm giving them feedback. I'm guiding them through the exercise over the 2 hours. I answer their questions and then they get the recording. And I suppose Zoom has opened up a great potential here as well. And COVID has taught us something that before I was traveling continuously, my workload was crazy. And you know what? I really feel that the last 2 years has been a great reset for me. And to bring your attention back to really what matters most, because we can get carried away with the rat race. And society kind of drives us. There's always that kind of drive to be part of it. And the reset has been great. And I've always used the breath though. It's always there, and it's there for everybody. That even when it's a bit chaotic on the outside, you can bring your attention inwards and you can hold your attention on the breath and you can alter your states. And you know what? It's a great kind of crutch. It's just there, and it's wonderful to be able to tap into it. And it's also training the mind. So because, it can be very often that people get stressed and they're worrying and they're anxious and, thinking. And I was one of these people. I was thinking an awful lot when I was in my teenage years into my early 20s. And when you have your attention on the breath, you're helping to bring a quietness to the mind, and it brings a calmness to the mind, and it allows clearer solutions to arise. But it just makes life a bit softer. And that's where it should be.
Man, I love that. I have to agree with you 100% that the last 2 years have been tumultuous for sure, but absolutely a great reset and an opportunity for people to, take a look at their lives and redesign what they want in their lives. Yeah. And it's so cool that you were able to pivot and serve, potentially even more people without destroying yourself traveling all over the place. That's amazing. What an amazing resource for people in a super affordable price. Patrick, this has been an amazing conversation. What is one simple tip you would like to give to somebody who maybe this is just entering their field of consciousness and they would like to get started, but maybe don't know how to jump in?
I would start doing all of your physical exercise with your mouth closed. And at the start, it's a bit tougher, but keep doing it and go a bit slower if you have to, because it's a case of quality over quantity. And never wake up with a dry mouth in the morning. So make sure that you get your mouth closed. And even just start with that, and the thing is that if it brings you benefits, and then you're likely then to delve a little bit further into it.
And those benefits come fast. I mean, you're right. It is uncomfortable when you're getting started with some of these things, but it's quite incredible, like how quickly you start to see those benefits. Patrick McKeown, where would you like people to go to find you and your work and connect with you?
So the Zoom courses, you'll find them on buteyko.clinic.com. That's BUTEYKO clinic.com. And the other website is oxygenadvantage.com. And the children's videos, which are free of charge, are also on buteyko.clinic.com. And then there's social media, the same names, Instagram, for example, and YouTube has quite a good few videos that can be helpful for people.
That's awesome. Your Instagram channel is wonderful as well. There's so many cool tips and tricks, and you guys post to that all the time. Super, super helpful. We will link to all of that in the show notes. Patrick McKeown, thank you so very much for everything that you've done, for everything that you've uncovered about something that seemingly is off the radar, but is so essential and important. And we're so grateful for you and your work and making so many resources available to people. Thank you for taking the time to come on our show today. We really, really appreciate it. We've been looking forward to this for quite a while.
It's a pleasure. Thanks very much, Casey.
Thank you very much. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.